You put out a press statement yesterday, the city did, saying that this entire block was closed. On Apple Maps, you know what it shows? It shows this entire intersection closed. Election is 8 days away. You said we could close this entire intersection, and then the day of, you show up in a fresh suit with all your cameras, trying to show like you're big and strong that you can shut this down.
All right, so we'll break down this video for us, how it even happened.
The president's going to have a rally in, say, Atlanta, Georgia. What we do is we go there a week before. We look at, okay, here's where we're going to put the stage. Here's where we're going to put the banners. And then the mayor of Allentown, who is a Democrat, shows up the day before our event. And so he shows up in this nice suit, and he's doing interviews. And during these interviews, he's trying to shut us down. All of a sudden, about 5:15, cars just come, swinging through this intersection. And I'm really confused. I almost got hit by a car. And I walk up to the police there who are kind of overlooking this whole process. And I say, what's going on? Why did you guys open all the barricades? They said, well, the mayor ordered us to open the barricades.
What's up? Welcome to the Vox Valdez podcast. Today's sponsor is Mecca Fitness. If you want a six-pack on your body and you want happiness in and around the mouth, Mecca provides pure happiness to your doorstep in the microwave and to put muscles on your body. So check them out, mecca.fitness. But we're just going to dive right into this. Today I have James Nilsson here.
Mm-hmm. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining me. I actually first met him on the campaign trail. We were rivals, kind of. He was running Trent Stagg's campaign. I was doing Jason Walton's, and we just started chatting a couple of times, and it wasn't very rivalristic. It was just chill. And when I first saw him, I was like, dang, who's this handsome guy? He's going to have a future here in politics pretty soon. And yeah, and then you went from Trent's campaign to Trump's campaign.
Sure did.
What was that like? So going from Utah, I mean, I guess that's a federal race, but then to a big national one.
Yeah, no, I thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, for sure, man.
I've always very much loved politics. Been in politics really since I was 16 years old, so it's been 8 years now where I've been deeply interested in politics. And the way I even got the Trent Stagg's campaign position was really interesting because I went to D.C. with a friend of mine back in 22, and I moved from Idaho to Utah. I was in real estate school because Utah County doesn't have a lot of realtors, as you know. And he happened to be at a barbecue with Trent Stagg's in May of 2023, and Trent Stagg's happened to mention to him that he was looking for somebody to help run his campaign, and for whatever reason, my friend suggested me, so I got the job and dropped out of real estate school in May of 23, and then obviously came up short in the primary in the Trent Stagg's campaign, and at the convention, I had met someone who was on Trump's team, shout out Hannah, and she mentioned that they were looking for people to help join the campaign, especially once they brought on the VP nominee, and that they were going to need more people on the campaign in that regard. And so, yeah, our primary was June 27th, I believe. And then right after that, it's funny, I actually got reached out to by the RFK presidential campaign. They offered me to run their campaign in Utah, and I declined. And I said, I felt like I couldn't run a campaign for Trent Stagg's where we're very pro-Trump, and that's where I'm at politically, ideologically, and then join a campaign with someone who explicitly is trying to run against that. And so they offered me that in July, and then I just didn't really hear anything for about a month. Started looking for other opportunities in the private sector, and because I've been in campaigns now in politics for 2 straight years. And so ultimately, I started a fitness business similar to what you do. On August 13th is when I officially filed to form that business and got the domain done and was building it all out. And then 2 days later, August 15th, I got a text saying, hey, clear out your schedule. You're going to travel on the Trump campaign in 2 days. So I left for Omaha, Nebraska on August 17th and didn't come home really until November 8th. So I was on the campaign for the last 4 months and still helping with the inaugural and other stuff right now. So it's been a crazy journey.
No, it's awesome, and you've had some interesting experiences. I think one that a lot of people have seen, tons of people have seen, millions of people have seen, everybody's seen, is you did mostly like a lot of security stuff too, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this video, and we'll play it.
Intersection. You said it 3 times, and then all of a sudden you let the traffic come through, and I'm trying to put out bike rack while dodging cars at the same time. Don't. You think I'm gonna fucking take it off now?
I don't expect you to put yourself in danger.
Oh yeah, well then we got cars coming in from all 4 intersections while I'm in the middle of it.
Close that.
Oh really?
Yes.
You put out a press statement yesterday. The city did, saying that this entire block was closed on Apple Maps. You know what it shows? It shows this entire intersection closed. Look it up. You think I'm gonna remove the barricades now? Yeah, you're out of your fucking mind. Don't ever pull that shit on me again. The entire police force was confused. Yeah, go ahead and call your chief, please. You're gonna open it up while the trucks are right there too. Really? You got our food trucks right there. This is nuts. How is this in the way of voting? So if someone lives on that block right there, they can't walk around to the other side. Why don't you walk it with me? Let's walk. Oh really? Am I being a problem? I'm not the one who lied to you the entire time. You tried to pull some fake shit on the permits. Oh really? You're laughing? You told us Saturday it was fine. And then you say we can't have our porta potties there? Really? Okay, go ahead and fucking call him. You're saying you're trying to pull that permit shit on us? You told us we could do that. Oh really? You gotta pull a permit now? Oh, okay, yeah, right. Come on now. Oh really? Election is 8 days away. You said we could close up this entire intersection, and then the day of, you show up in a fresh suit with all your cameras, trying to show like you're big and strong that you can shut this down. Oh yeah? Oh yeah? Oh, okay. Why don't we walk it? Why don't we walk it right now? Let's go and walk it. What are they? Arnold Schwarzenegger? They don't have to do anything crazy. They're going to walk on the outside of the fence.
All right, so we'll like break down this video for us, how it even happened.
Yeah, so I was on what's called the advance team. And the advance team, you can think of them as the events team. Basically what we do is if the president's going to have a rally in, say, Atlanta, Georgia, which is, I was in Georgia for a month. What we do is we go there a week before. We look at, okay, here's where we're going to put the stage. Here's where we're going to put the banners. Here's what we're going to do with messaging. You work with Secret Service to figure out the president's movements. Then you got to figure out guest movements. You got to work with local police to figure out crowd control. You got to figure out where you're going to put protesters if there's a free speech zone. So it's a lot of logistical things that people don't really think about going into an event. We handle all of that. So like, for instance, they tell us, oh, by the way, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson's going to show up. You got to be able to figure out, okay, here's where we're going to pick him up. Here's where we're going to put him during the event. If there is a call up during an event, like with Marco Rubio, like, okay, you got to escort Marco Rubio to his seat and then get him ready to go on stage. So it's a lot of that behind the scenes stuff that we take care of. Now with the event that the video that people have seen, that took place in Allentown, Pennsylvania on October 29th. And that was a really interesting situation because we had gotten there a week before for that rally. And what we do is we meet with local law enforcement, we meet with mayor, we meet with whoever we have to figure out the setup. Because say if you're doing a rally in a field, you don't have to necessarily work with city officials or permitting or any of that kind of stuff. But with this, it was in downtown Allentown, Pennsylvania. And so they had to shut down essentially 4 city blocks for that to happen. We met with the mayor about 5 days before our event and told him what we were going to shut down and when. And it's really important because we had it was a 10,000 seat arena, and we had 15,000 people show up in line. So we had to be able to process, because if you're going to a presidential event, You have to go through mags, you have to go through security, you have to be vetted by Secret Service. There's a whole process for it. And so that's the reason why we shut down those 4 city blocks.
So how do they get through 15,000 people? They just like go through lines like almost at a concert? Or?
Yeah, it's like a concert. And so not only that, you have the general admission audience where the tickets are free. You have a VIP line. You have ADA lines, which is for folks in wheelchairs. And then you have a expedited entry line. And then you also have a media line. So you have to not only process those, just the people attending the event, you also have to do special guests and VIP and media, and they all have to have different entrances. So it's a very complex setup. And so that's the reason why we had to shut down those city blocks, and we agreed to do it at 5 p.m. Well, this was right during when Tony Hinchcliffe made that joke about Puerto Ricans. And there happened to be a sizable population of Puerto Ricans who lived in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And Pennsylvania is obviously a very important state. If we knew that if we won Pennsylvania, we'd essentially win the whole thing. And so what had happened was Tony Hinchcliffe makes that joke, and then the media start to run with it. And then the mayor of Allentown, who is a Democrat, shows up the day before our event when we're putting down porta potties and we're setting up the lines and we're doing everything in that regard. He shows up, does these interviews with MSNBC and CNN talking about how that comment is going to affect the political outcome in Pennsylvania. And so he shows up in this nice suit, and he's doing interviews, and during these interviews, he's trying to shut us down. And so clearly someone had given him a call saying, hey, probably someone from the Kamala campaign, like, try to thwart this event, do what you can to mess with the campaign, which happens quite a bit. And so he shows up, he tries to shut down where we're putting our water stations and our trucks and all of that.
So like, what was he doing? Is like just saying like, hey, you can't do that?
Yeah, basically, and I was very respectful the first few times that we interacted, and because I was confused because he was deliberately going against everything he said that we could do, that we agreed upon. And so he shows up, he tries to shut down where we're putting our porta potties and says that we don't have a permit for that. And so I'm like, all right, that would have been nice to know. So then I have to go through City Hall, I have to go through the campaign, we get permitting done for that. And so then we're good to go, right? I asked the mayor, I said, okay, well, we're still good to shut down the streets at 5 o'clock to set up the bike rack, which is just, bike rack is what you put together for lines. You can just link them together. It's what you set your bike on. That's what we call bike rack. And so I said, I made sure with him, I said, we're still good to shut down at 5 and put in the bike rack. He said, yeah, we're good to go. No worries. Well, then about an hour later, Don Jr. shows up across the street next to a voting booth and is handing out pizza and gives a short speech talking about just helping get out the vote effort in Pennsylvania, essentially. And while he's doing that, the mayor had changed clothes and put on sunglasses and was riding his bike around the perimeter of that event. And I walked up to him and I said, hey, Mayor, can I help you with something? And he said, no. He was kind of very curt with me, but I said, just to double check, we're still good to close down the roads at 5. And he said, yeah. So 5 o'clock rolls around, we get some of our volunteers, we get some labor there to help. And 5 o'clock, we're putting up the bike rack in the streets. All of a sudden, about 5:15, cars just come, swinging through this intersection. And I'm really confused. I almost got hit by a car. And I walk up to the police there who are kind of overlooking this whole process. And I say, what's going on? Why did you guys open all the barricades? They said, well, the mayor ordered us to open the barricades. And the mayor didn't tell me that. He didn't tell our campaign that. He didn't tell Secret Service that. He didn't tell anybody that. And so clearly by this time I knew he was acting in bad faith and that he was just trying to screw with us. And so I let the police know how I felt. I called Secret Service. I called the chief of police and said, in essence, get the mayor down here. I want to talk to him and figure all this out. Well, about an hour goes by, and by this time, I essentially told the police, I'm just going to close down the streets and put up the bike rack by my own. And the police were very much on my side. In fact, I got a coin here. the police gave me in the aftermath. Let's see if I can find it. I didn't know what it was. It's a challenge coin, but
What does that mean?
essentially it's to reward citizens who have courage and good citizenship, apparently. And so that's what this looks like right here. You can see the Fraternal Order police sign on there, and the logo for the city of Allentown, which was founded in 1762. And so ultimately I shut down the streets by putting bike rack out there, brought the food trucks in, brought the big TV screen in, and started to line up the bike rack according to our guest movements. And the mayor shows up about an hour later, and he says, in essence, you can't do this. You don't have approval for this. We can't put any of this here. And kind of,
Was he trying to do it for like TV?
Yeah.
Like just to get like views?
He was just trying to get in the news. He was trying to show that he was big and strong. He was trying to be a good advocate for the Kamala campaign. And so then I really just let him have it, because what he was saying is that even though we had agreed on all of these 5 days ago, he was trying to say that because there was a voting booth like half a block away, that we were going to block off access to the voting booth. And you can see in the video, I say that's just not true. And then he says, oh, well, if people are in wheelchairs and live down the block, they can't get access to the voting booth. And I said, well, that's just 100% not true. There's literally a ramp that goes around the outside of where our bike rack is. And then he was trying to say that we couldn't shut down the businesses nearby to have our event, which essentially means that we couldn't do our event there. And so he was just doing it for political purposes. And so I just expressed the proper righteous indignation towards him. And he was trying to say that they didn't announce any of this and that this all caught him by surprise. And then I pulled up a tweet that I had seen where the city of Allentown put out a tweet from the city of Allentown's Twitter account saying that the roads were going to be closed off at 5 p.m. And not only that, the city of Allentown Police Department also put out a statement on Twitter saying that the roads were going to be closed off at 5 p.m. And on Apple Maps and on Google Maps, it showed that this intersection was completely cut off. So he was just wrong in every aspect. And I explained that to him in a rather colorful way that was pretty strong. And there was an old lady filming it, and I didn't want to go out to get out there because I didn't want that interaction to necessarily be public. And I walked up to the lady afterwards, and by the way, we got him to agree to let us set up the way we wanted to do it. So he ended up folding in the end. And there was an old lady filming the whole interaction, and I walked up to her afterwards and I said, "You're not going to post this, right?" And she said, "No, I don't even know how to post on social media." So I said, "Great." Didn't really think too much about it. And then what had happened was she sent it to her daughter, who was a streamer, and then she posted it. And it ended up going incredibly viral. And so the next day, we're setting up for the event. We're getting ready. We're putting the final touches on everything. And I just start getting bombarded with these text messages of these TikToks that people are sending me. And they're like, "Is this you? Or is this really you?" Like, people couldn't believe that it was me. And I was wearing a Trump Force 47 jacket, so it's pretty easy to identify the fact that I was on the campaign. And so I just didn't want to give the campaign, especially in Pennsylvania, a week before the election, any bad publicity. I was really scared about that, and frankly thought I might get fired for it. But then, and during our event that day, he was riding his bike. The mayor was riding his bike around the outside of the event, and so many people had seen it by that point that the whole crowd was booing him.
Oh,
By that point. And so I felt pretty good about that. And I told myself, even if I do get fired or in trouble here, I did the right thing. That guy was a jerk. He deserved that interaction. And so, and not only that, he also led a protest against us outside of our event. And he tried to send his health bureau officials to shut down our food trucks and threaten to arrest us and remove us from site for operating our food trucks, even though they also had the proper permitting. So it was all a political show. And by the time the campaign got to our event and the staff was there, they had seen it too, and they liked it as well, which was encouraging. And that video went incredibly viral, and I just think it's really funny because I didn't want it to get out there at all, but none of that was scripted. It was a genuine reaction, and that mayor's a jerk, and hopefully he gets what's coming for him in the form of getting thrown out of office.
That's wild. That's a wild, like, also like.
And I got to meet the president.
That's what I was
because
going to
of it,
say.
too.
I was like, you met, I mean, I saw a picture of you with him on Instagram. What did he have to say about it?
Yeah, so it's so funny. I also felt like the situation reflected our campaign message a lot because, I mean, Donald Trump has been through 5 different court cases this year alone where it's political persecution. It's political officials that don't like him, don't like the Republican Party, who are using their public power to essentially, and weaponizing their authority against a political rival, whether that's like Colorado or Maine trying to kick him off the ballot, whether that's the Jack Smith case in D.C. or the Documents case in Florida or Fannie Willis's case in Atlanta. It's politicians and people who are entrusted by their citizens and are not playing by our same set of rules. They're using their power to deliberately go after their opponents. And so I felt like it was a very similar situation with the mayor, and that he was using his authority as mayor to try and thwart a campaign. Mm-hmm. And so obviously I think he resonated with that. And it was the night before the election, and we're all taking pictures. We're taking pictures in, I think it was Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. No, it was in Reading, Pennsylvania, rather. And he takes pictures. What was funny about the president, getting to see him behind the scenes is really interesting because he's very kind, very charitable. Whenever we take pictures with military or law enforcement, he'll talk to them for a very long time. He'll say, like, what's it like to be a police officer in this area? Like, how are your families doing? Like, very, very, very much interested in what we would call ordinary people. But he doesn't have that pretense of being better than someone. Like, he's genuinely a curious guy and very nice and very charming. And everyone who works for him loves him. And so we had just gotten done taking pictures with some of the local law enforcement in Reading. And one of his guys comes up to me and he goes, "Have you gotten a picture with the president yet?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Okay, let's do it right now." And I was like, "Right now? Okay." And so I made sure, like, my hair looked good. I made sure I didn't have any stains or anything, because it's a picture with the president. You got to look nice. And so he goes, "Mr. President, come here." And he walks over to me and he goes, "This is James Nelson. This is the man in the video who stood up to the Allentown mayor." And he goes, "Wow, that was a great video. Thank you very much." And I said, "My pleasure, Mr. President." Shook his hand, and I'm standing next to him, and he goes, "Look at this guy. He's very tall. He's very handsome. This is my kind of guy." And I said, "Thank you, Mr. President," and shook his hand. And he looked up at me and he goes, "So are you going to come with us to D.C. after this?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Very good, very good, very good." And I said, "Yes, sir," again. And I said, shook his hand one more time for good measure. And I said, "Thank you, Mr. President. Good luck and God bless tomorrow." And walked out the door, and that was the night before the election. And there was just I personally felt very confident we were going to win. There was not a moment on the campaign from day one where I thought we were going to lose. Just being on the ground and talking to voters about issues, because I was in Georgia, a swing state, for a month. I was in Pennsylvania for several weeks. I was in Wisconsin, and got to talk to people on the ground and figure out what they were actually concerned about. And I just knew the way that Trump was running his campaign and that we were working on it, that we were going to more resonate with the American people. So that night before the election, you could tell he was in a very good mood. He thought he was going to win, and he ended up winning.
That's incredible. I'm even more impressed, though, with your impersonation.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm dying.
It's funny. There's like a rally Trump voice. There's a podcast Trump voice, and then there's a small talk Trump voice. And he gets more of a Brooklyn, like New York accent the bigger the audience is. And so meeting him in person, he doesn't he's not the same person you see on camera as you meet him in person, in a good way, because he really is very kind. I came to really just admire him and respect him for his courage. This is a man who's been through 2 assassination attempts, 5 different court cases. He's been impeached twice, and yet I came away thinking that this is a man who has been terminally miscommunicated to the American people by mass media. This is a man who really cares about our country. This is a man who really is the most courageous man I've ever met in my life. I mean, still doing rallies outside after an assassination attempt, and really just a charming man who was a great president, who's going to be historic president, I believe, in January, and just came to really respect and admire him. And really, like they say, not to meet your heroes, but that man is incredible. I respect him so much. He really cares about our country. And so to just see that in person and have that validated, that this man really cares about our country, was incredibly important for me.
Well, it's wild. Like, people will attack him a lot in a whatever way. But I'm like, dude, this guy's like 100 years old. He has all the money in the world. Could do anything. He could do anything that he would want. And like, he's probably the only elected official, maybe not the only, but one of the few that is losing money. And I don't think anyone's lost as much money as him. And that is sacrificing their life, all of their time, like being attacked, like opening himself up to whatever. And it's like, is it just for, like, I don't know what their argument is like, is this for his ego? He could do anything else. Like, he's probably the most attacked president and during the campaign, like presidential candidate of all time.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why would anyone wish that upon themselves? I don't get it.
And not only that, like how it affects his kids, how it affects his wife, how it affects his friends. This is a man who's deeply loyal. I've come to learn, really cares about people. And like I said, he's not too big to talk to anyone. He loved talking to firefighters. He loves talking to policemen. He loved talking to soldiers. He loves talking to those kind of people. And it really comes from his business background, where I would say he's hospitable in the sense where he's always asking people, like, can I get you water? Are you comfortable? Do you need any food? Is there anything I can help you out with? Like, he's just very much in tune that way. And as far as sacrifice, I can't think of really any other president or any other figure in politics who has gone through what he's gone through and yet maintain a sense of grace and courage under fire with someone who has a real vision and who really loves this country and has a chance to not only shape the future of our country for the next generation, but really for Western civilization as a whole. And I mean, the fact that he's lost hundreds of millions of dollars, not only just because he's been president, but because of lost opportunities just as a businessman. And you talk about like what his family has gone through, and Don Jr. talks about this a lot, like the trauma associated with watching your father or grandfather get shot in the head on national television, and then the media continue to paint him as the next Hitler, which is just entirely not true. And so there are almost no words to describe it. I would actually, what I've said is that it's biblical what he's gone through. Like, there's no other person you can compare him to, especially in American politics, who has gone through what he's gone through, and who has yet won one of the most resounding victories in modern politics. There's not even a close comparison.
No, I mean, there really isn't. Like, being on involved with the campaign, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, like, what happened with the assassination attempt in Butler? Like, what do people say about it? Like, were you there? What actually happened?
I was not there. I got brought on about a month after that. I have friends who were there. And what's interesting is that one of my good friends, Ryan Rigler, he was there. It was his first trip. And what he said, which really has resonated with me deeply, is that when he got shot and was on the ground and then came up and gave a fist pump and let people know that he was okay, that it saved lives because there was so much worry and fear in the crowd that he had just died right in front of them, and that by standing up and showing them that he was okay and that he was not going to stop fighting, that it calmed the crowd down, and it actually might have saved lives by doing that. Because there were over 10,000 people there, and if the president had just been shot, he was shot, but if he had been killed in front of all of them, could you imagine the mass panic that would have ensued after that? And so by him doing that, he gave us one of the most iconic photos of all time, obviously, and showed really the true character of him under actual fire, but also saved lives in that crowd and prevented mass panic. And so that's one thing that people don't necessarily think about. But as far as what really happened, I don't know. I think it's strange what happened, but I've got no definitive answers about how any of that went down. But I hope that that we'll be able to get answers soon on that in a way where people have more trust in their institutions.
Yeah, that's the thing that I think is so concerning is you listen to these people on like whatever, whether it's like the Sean Ryan show or whatever, who have like backgrounds in Secret Service or military training or whatsoever. And they're like, I don't know how this happened pretty much. And so I think it's really easy to speculate.
Yeah.
But
yeah, because I mean, really, number one thing that is true is that they haven't been able to hack his phone. And that to me is a little suspicious. I think that oftentimes with conspiracies, people like to think up, there's this quiet group of people that are really pulling the strings, and they can manipulate the media and events so well. And that's kind of where conspiracies come in. And conspiracies are given oxygen by a lack of information. Mm-hmm. And so if we could really find out what fully happened in a transparent way where people who failed to do their job are held accountable, I think that would give less oxygen to that. But I'm also one to think that people are not clever or sophisticated enough to pull off world-changing events in the back room that is so effective. I like to begin with facts and go from there. And what I know at the moment is that he was able to get within 130 yards of the president and fire, I think, 6 shots at him. And in that he had a sketchy background and he was in a BlackRock commercial, which is very strange, obviously. But I don't...
Had like visits to his apartment where he would go visit places. And his apartment, there's no silverware in his apartment whatsoever. Nothing in there.
No, it's definitely weird, but I don't have a definitive answer for that, and I don't want to speculate on what could possibly have happened.
So what's next? Like, what do you like? Because I think you've had such an interesting background. Now it's like, okay, what do you go from here?
Yeah. Well, politically, I would like to work in the administration. During the transition process, it's a little bit different because they have to fill out the senior positions and then the positions that like if you work in the Department of State, for instance, they got to figure out, and they already have figured out, Marco Rubio is going to be the Secretary of State nominee. Mm-hmm. But once they figure out those senior positions, then they start to figure out, okay, now that we know who they're going to work for, we got to put them in a position. So there are several areas that I'm interested in working at in the administration. I think for Utah, Secretary of the Interior would be really interesting. They deal with a lot of federal lands. Department of Energy would be really interesting too, because energy is a huge problem in the United States. It's one of the reasons why housing has gone up dramatically is because of the cost of energy and energy production. And so I think Department of Energy would be interesting. I'm also very interested in reforming education to the best way we can. And also, I mean, I'm interested in basically every topic, but like I would say education, energy, interior, and legislative affairs are probably the top 4 And so I'll find out pretty soon what that's going to look like in the next few weeks. But very excited to have any opportunity to work in the administration whatsoever. And I think that with what people will see with this administration is a more experienced administration, a more experienced President Donald Trump, who knows the inner workings of the federal government better than he did before. And what's so important in D.C. is personnel. For instance, what a famous phrase in D.C. is that personnel is policy. And so him appointing people who are willing to actually execute on his agenda with no ulterior motives is extremely important. And so that's why you're seeing people who have more of a demonstrated track record of loyalty to President Trump are getting put in these positions, is because, like no other president before, were Donald Trump's efforts thwarted by people.
His own members of his own cabinet.
Yeah, members of his own cabinet. I mean, Mark Milley, who was National Security Council, he, after President Trump left office, he actually was quoted as saying that he tried to thwart Trump's efforts in certain areas because he believed that it was in the best interest of the United States, which is completely wrong, because the president has been duly elected by the American people to carry out his agenda that he communicates to them. And so if you have unelected people, because no one elected Mark Milley. He's a general, he served his country, and something that he can be proud of, but nobody elected him to that position. And so one of the big problems you see in government today is with all these agencies, with all these employees, there are people in the federal government who are not elected, who carry the power of regulation.
The whole entire legislation.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
they just make laws at will almost.
Yeah, I mean, and they don't even, there's no accountability for it. So what their goal is to increase power and lessen their accountability, which is why Elon Musk and Vivek teaming up to do DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, is so important, is because
I think it's the most important.
Yeah.
Especially today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and one thing that people that isn't talked about as much really is a national debt. Our interest payments on the national debt have now exceeded our spending on defense.
Yeah, which is the biggest expenditure.
The biggest expenditure. And we're now, I mean, I think in the last 3 months, we've accumulated almost $500 billion more in debt, and that's just unsustainable. So we don't need to take, as Trent would say, scissors to cut these regulations and spending. We need to take a chainsaw to the whole administrative agencies and really clean that out, because if you can clean out those agencies, then not only can you set up President Trump for success, but you can also have a more honest government with the American people, where the people who are making the decisions that impact our lives are made by politicians who can be voted out of office. But for instance, during the pandemic, what you had happen was you had politicians ceding their power and their authority in decision-making to unelected bureaucrats like Fauci or like Deborah Birx. And the reason why they did that is because it's really convenient for them to say, well, Fauci, director of NIH, said that we should do this, and so I'm just following the science. Well, really, those decisions have to be made by the governor, they have to be made by the president, by your mayor. And when you cede authority to unelected bureaucrats, is it's convenient for the politicians, but it's not good for the country as a whole and for the people, because you can't unelect people who were never elected.
Well, it happens all the time in Congress and in the Senate is you'll see them get all mad at these bureaucrats on MSNBC, and it's just as a show. And it's like, these people are the people making all the laws, and then it's almost like a lot of the Congress people, the elected officials are just like actors getting mad at them or doing whatever, but they're really just bowing down to the power of the bureaucracy. That's what I like about Vivek, is that he's was saying when he was running that he wanted to cut down bureaucracy by 70%. And people think that's wild, but I agree with you. I think that's something that definitely needs to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't get our debt under control, if we don't get our government even within the bounds of just pre-pandemic spending, we're going to spend ourselves. I mean, we're going to cost entire generations of Americans, including my generation and your generation of Americans, to a weight of debt that is almost inconceivable. Before, I mean,
Well, I feel like it is now.
Yeah.
It's, the numbers they're throwing out there are just is pretty crazy.
yeah, so we have to, I don't know if we need to pass a balanced budget amendment. There's several ways you can,
Well, it's wild.
go at
Even you
that.
look at like the Department of Defense, they're like, okay, they've had 7 audits or 8 audits and they've failed literally every single one of them. So what does that mean when they fail an audit is that they literally have money that's unaccounted for.
Yeah.
And what happens? It's like, oh, just try harder next time. Like I haven't heard of anyone high up getting fired because they have misplaced billions of dollars. It's not like it's like, oh, in thousands, like, oh, we're missing a few cents.
Yeah, and what's crazy is if a private citizen like you or I were to fail an audit 7 years in a row or fail to pay our taxes 7 years in a row, then we would get thrown in jail.
Yeah, literally
You'd get
prison.
penalized. You wouldn't be able to start a business. You would lose insurance. Like there's so many ramifications, but if you're a deep state bureaucrat, you can pull that same stuff and then there's no repercussions. Or look, for instance, at the Afghanistan withdrawal. We lost 13 service members at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan during that atrocious withdrawal, which you can debate on whether or not to withdraw or leave troops in place, but you don't take out soldiers before you take out your equipment. You always take out your soldiers last. And there was no repercussions for that.
Literally,
no one
you
got
have the
fired.
Taliban doing parades with billions of dollars of Blackhawks and tanks.
And so, like, it's the most amateur. It's a completely an easy decision. I mean, but no one was no one was fired. No one in the media, certainly they tried to quiet down the story. There was no repercussions whatsoever for those people. But if you Venmo someone over $800, then the IRS gets to track you and potentially audit you, but you can fail. If you're the Pentagon, you can literally not be able to accurately track whatever their budget is, like $900 billion, and there's no repercussions, which is why people are terribly afraid. If you're in DC right now, or you're a bureaucrat or part of the establishment or deep state or what have you, they're terrified to have people like Vivek and Elon Musk and Pete Hegseth in power because they're not going to abide by the same games. They're going to come with an outsider's perspective and they're going to really shake things up. And that's what the president is really trying to show right now, is that he's going to bring in people who are not afraid to shake things up in a lot of ways. But I mean, the American people, there was a poll that came out last week, I believe, and it showed that 61% of Americans approve of how the transition is going, which goes to show you that the American people want change and they deserve change. And if we do not get the kind of change that Trump has advocated for, then we're going to go off a cliff.
Well, it's true. Like, I wish more people realized how dire circumstances we're in. And it's like, that's like at the federal level. And I think it can be really overwhelming for some people where they're like, well, there's nothing I can do. And the best thing you can do is vote. And luckily we did. But do you have any opinion on like what's going on with Utah at that level?
I would say Utah, I've traveled all over the country now. Like I said, on the campaign, I visited Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nebraska, Florida, Wisconsin. I went all over the country and got an appreciation for those different systems. And in Utah, it really is a very unique state. It's a very unique culture. It's geographically very unique. And I would say that Utah is on the precipice of not collapse or anything too dire in that regard. What I would say Utah is on track for is deep corruption that we've seen in our institutions, that we've seen in our political process. I would say that we're in danger of slow walking ourselves into a false sense of conservatism where really what our state legislature does now, which is controlled mostly by developers, is that the developers pay money to these politicians to win these seats, and then they abide completely by those big developers. Now, because of the growth of our state, we need developers in certain areas. We got to build more houses. We got to build more roads. We got to do a lot of things with infrastructure. But we've ceded a lot of our state's authority and even city authority to these outside corporations that really are controlling our political process. You look at the arena that they're building in Salt Lake, that ski lift that they're building up the mouth of Butterfield Canyon. Look at the new homes that they're building, 10,000 new homes in Utah, and those are all given to people with political connections to the right people in the legislature who are elected, and it's done in a way that benefits the politicians, and they're also given, like a lot of these developers are given special tax breaks. They're given, there's a lot, liability is not placed on the developers in a lot of these areas. It's placed on the city. The city, a lot of times, and this is what Trent talks about, is if there's developers in your city, that the city can't properly tax on those developments because it's going a lot of times towards those developers. So the cities and towns and counties are not properly getting the benefits of a lot of these developments. It's going largely towards these corporations, which then fund politicians. And then you could also talk about Senate Bill 54, which allows people to essentially buy their way onto the ballot and bypass the delegate process, which I think is also a big issue, because essentially what that means for Utah is you can have a very wealthy candidate, or what I would say are more dangerously, because there are people like Jason who created their own wealth, who are using their own resources for their campaign. There's nothing wrong with that. But what you have is you have these well-connected people who are running for office who don't put a lot of faith in the voters in the primary, in the delegate process. They get onto the ballot by spending, sometimes $300,000 to collect enough signatures. And then what they do is they just drop a bunch of money in the market right before the primary election, and then that's how they win. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to figure out, are we a delegate state, are we a caucus state, or are we just a straight primary state? But you can't have both of those going on at the same time, because then it's rewarding. You got to make it more clear to the voters how you're going to select candidates. You can't do a hybrid of one or the of both of them. You got to choose one or the other.
Like just pay your way all the way through, and that which is the issue worth what we're having right now is people are literally just buying their way all the way through to win, and then you like you were saying, you get outside corporations or outside interest groups, whether it's an energy or climate control person, or whether it's, you name it. There's just so many companies that have interest in Utah. Yeah. And I think that's a thing that people really need to wake up to, that, I mean, is really concerning to me, and why I'm even involved with any of this is it's really scary when you go and talk to a lot of these people and you hear these state house members or Senate members talk, and they're like, oh, my family's been in real estate for years, for decades, for generations. We've been developers for generations. You know us, we built this, and this. And then you find out even here in Orem, where I live, like, we brought in a Walmart, but guess how much tax dollars Orem gets from Walmart? Zero. We have the University Mall, same thing. We have all of the Woodbury Corporation stuff, and that's just Orem, and that's a microcosm for everything that's happening statewide. Like Trent Staggs talks about it in Riverton. Every city has these issues where these big corporations come in, and I love how you talked about federal lands a little bit ago, because that's important. And what's just a quick snippet is the federal lands that are owned in Utah. People wonder how we can get money for education and for a lot of these public things. It's through collecting taxes on land that people own. And because the federal government owns 67% of Utah, that doesn't give us the ability to develop that land and collect taxes. But the deeper issue is the land that we do have to develop, we're being sold out to these big corporations. So we're not even capitalizing on, what is that, the 23% of land that we do own. That sounds terrible. We should rephrase that. Utah actually owns 23% of its own state. Yeah. But we're not even capitalizing on the 23% that we do own to collect taxes from Walmart and all the other big corporations that are building like it should be. And that's just a huge issue. Yeah.
And I'm a free market guy. I believe that, if you have enough money, if you're successful, you ought to be able to be rewarded for that. But what I'm against is a cabal of power that uses deceptive tricks and does not reward the stakeholders that are being directly affected by it.
It kills small business.
Absolutely. And if you think about Utah, for instance, too, we've got an interesting geographic situation where we've got a lot of mountains, and you can't build on those mountains. You got to build around them. But in a state that's surrounded by mountains, we've got limited space, right? We can't go up Mount Timpanogos. You got to build around those areas. And so as far as housing goes, if you've got a fixed amount of land that you can actually operate with, like Utah County or Salt Lake County, well, then if you have a fixed amount and you're still trying to build more houses, it's going to drive up the cost of those houses. And so when it comes to lands, if we could, and Mike Lee talks about this, if we could get 1% of what the federal government owns around cities and towns, if we could open that up to where Utah can control that, that will drop the price of houses because there's more room to build.
Yeah, it's like the sagebrush areas. People are like, oh, not Moab or like Zion's National Park or like the wherever Canyonlands or ski resorts. It's like, no, like literally, you know, the sagebrush when you're driving down I-15 and you're like, what's going on here? It's that stuff.
Yeah, and I think Utah has such a unique culture. I think we can all agree on that. And I think that Utahns, because of our religious affiliations, for the most part, Utah's overwhelmingly LDS. There is a certain implicit trust and authority that comes with that, where you say to yourself, I trust my neighbors, I trust my bishop, I trust my professor. There's a very culturally, it's just in you from the moment you're born into this culture of, I'm going to just trust the people who are in charge because they're supposed to have our best interests in mind. Well, a lot of Utahns, that's fine if you want to believe that, but the actual reality is that there are people who take advantage of that for their own purposes, and it directly affects you in a way that is pretty dramatic. And so I think that Utahns culturally don't want to think of the people in charge as not having their best interest in mind.
Which they think is wild. And it's crazy that when they find out that one of these people does something like illegal, like terrible, like they go to prison for it, people have like identity crises. Yeah. And they're like, they don't even know who they are because they place so much trust in this figure, whoever it might be, that they're like, oh, my whole world is shaken and changed because they place so much trust in
and also just think about illegal immigration. I mean, so, and I don't blame the developers for this. I would do the same thing. But say you're a developer and you're building a lot of houses, you're doing big projects. You're going to want to pay illegal immigrants to work on those projects, right? You're not going to want to pay more because the cost of labor has gone up. The cost of goods, the cost of materials has gone up, obviously. And so if you're a developer and in the Senate, it's mostly made up of developers, and developers spend a lot of money helping candidates get elected, well, then you're not going to take a harsher stance against illegal immigration. So, for instance, with E-Verify, there's a reason why they won't take the E-Verify rules, which says in order to work for a corporation, you have to have certain status in this country. You can't just be undocumented. Well, in Utah, I believe that the E-Verify rule kicks in at 150 employees. Well, there's a reason why they won't take that down to, say, 20 or 30, because they want that undocumented skill force to help them with their projects.
Well, they want that. And then, I mean, Spencer Cox says he wants to build 350,000 houses to new Americans, which, I mean, I don't know if you know what a new American is, but it's not a Utahn.
It sounds like a bullshit term, to be honest with you.
It is. It's fake. It just says like, hey, how can we get people from other countries to move into these houses so we can make more money on their internet, their fiber optic cables, on building their houses, on providing them services which are owned by Spencer Cox and his friends.
Yeah.
And so,
go figure. I mean, it doesn't take a genius. I mean, really,
it seems like it does. That's the thing that's wild, Drake. It doesn't take a genius to track this, but people, like, when I tell people this,
effort.
Well, they're like, dude, there's no way. Like, they are like so shocked, and like they start like, dude, this is like conspiracy theory stuff. Like, there's no way this would happen at a government level. And it's like, but it is though. Like, it is.
And what people need to realize is, I've been in politics for 8 years now. Okay. And a lot of people think of politics, especially today, as really ideological. You got the conservatives versus the liberals, you got Republicans versus Democrats. And really, that's not, that part of that is true. That's more true on a grassroots level, on kind of more behind the scenes type of stuff. But really, when it comes down to the people in charge, it's not ideological, really. People will say what they have to do to get elected for the most part, which I can understand to a certain extent. And then at that point, they're thinking about, okay, how can I act in a way that I want to and maintain my seat in Congress or my seat in the governorship, and what do I have to do that? And it's not an ideological thing. It's more about power and money and access. And that's where people get politics wrong, is it's not these ideological people.
A bunch of do-gooders.
No, it's not even that. And it's really a representation of human nature, which is why I find politics so fascinating. Is like you'll have someone like Utah thinks of itself as very conservative, and that is true. But really, we're conservative in the sense that we know how to run businesses, we know how to maximize profit, we have a lot of entrepreneurs, and so in that way, we're very conservative. But to say we're culturally conservative, we are, but in a kind of passive way where we almost feel, and Spencer Cox does this a lot, which drives me nuts, is that it's almost like they're apologizing for what makes our state unique and what makes our culture unique. And like
they want to
feel like
assimilate to be like everybody else.
They have to apologize and explain their existence to people. But you shouldn't say that. You should say, no, actually, the way we do things here in Utah is that we're against abortion because it's wrong. Mm-hmm. We're against illegal immigration because it's wrong. We're against allowing illegal aliens to commit crimes in this country and not get deported. We're not in favor of the gender madness that we're seeing, right? We're not in favor of using pronouns. And that's not something we should apologize for. It's common sense. It's the reality of the world we live in. And so trying to apologize and meekly explain our existence to people is the wrong take, because Utah has a chance to be a beacon of light and an example to the rest of the country that shows culturally what really works. And it's what works for us is not by feeling bad or trying to make everybody feel welcome. That's making people feel welcome is a good thing. But trying to make people feel welcome at the expense of what has culturally made you relevant and what has economically made you strong is the entirely wrong approach. So I think Utah needs to, and everybody says wake up, which I believe does need to happen, and I think on a grassroots level is happening, but people need to understand that just what I would ask people watching this who don't believe in the conspiracy theory, is to just take a deeper dive into Utah, into our institutions here, into our politicians, and just look at their history, look at their financial figures, just look one level deeper. And I promise you, just by doing that, you'll be able to maybe reveal some uncomfortable truths to yourself, but it's incredibly important to know. Otherwise, we're going to continue to slow walk ourselves into really an autocratic type of state with a citizenry that is not well informed.
Well, that is what's happening. Yeah. And to me, it's like they just want to fit in. Like you're in elementary school, and there's that kid that wants to fit in so much. They usually have smelling markers with them, and they're like trying to like sniff the markers, and then they're the kid that just like, you can tell them anything. They're the gullible one. You're like, doesn't this smell like cherries? And they smell it a million times till they like pass out. Yeah. That's Utah's. They'll say like, Spencer Cox will say anything to fit in with the national landscape, whoever it might be. Mm-hmm. And he just is begging to be brought into the inner circles. Yeah. And it's not the right inner circles, I don't think.
No, it's not. I mean, look at what happened at the BYU volleyball game 2 years ago.
Exactly.
Where there was a false report that said that students at BYU were saying the N-word to a volleyball player at, I think it was Duke. And you had ESPN talk about it. You had a lot of people talk about it. And Spencer Cox, in the heat of the moment, calls this kid an asshole and says that he has no place in Utah. And turns out it was completely false. It was fabricated by the volleyball player. Or any of his actions really, where there's just this sense of we want to fit in. We're actually really cool. We're actually really diverse. And that's why they put forward DEI programs in the wake of 2020 in order to feel better. You had Spencer Cox calling people, there's a famous picture of him, or a tweet of him with a mask on that says, "Don't be an asshole, wear a mask." And so, Utah, there's a very much, because the culture is so dominant and because of our unique history where literally our relatives had to walk across the plains in 1847 and create what was at that point an entirely new country in order to get away from persecution. So we're kind of an interesting melting pot in that way. And we just should not apologize for who we are and what has made us successful. And people really need to look a little bit deeper at what's going on. And I'm someone who I don't mind not fitting in. I've always been very single-minded and very entrepreneurial. So I don't mind, as the mayor in Allentown can attest to, being a little bit difficult. And I think that people could take that approach more in Utah because, like, in Utah, everyone's nice. Like, it's popular to be nice. It's popular to be easy to get along with. It's not popular to be very upfront with people because it makes them uncomfortable. And in this culture and in this state, you're supposed to be nice. And that only gets you so far, where you're then easily manipulated by people. And if you go out to the East Coast, you go to Philadelphia, you go to New York, they're very blunt. And that's what I've learned about the East versus the West, is that in the West, everyone is just supposed to be nice. But there's a difference between being nice and being truthful and being more upfront with people. And I feel like that really sabotages us in a lot of ways.
No, it totally does. I think this is a great place to wrap up. I just want people to be able to find you, find information that you're putting out. Where can they look you up?
They can find me on Instagram at JamesNelson4. You can also follow my fitness page at Jimmer_fit.
Yeah, if you're looking to hit your goals, spell it for them. GYMMER_fit, because the reason why is my nickname growing up was Jimmer, JIMMER, after the greatest basketball player in BYU history. And so, Jimmer_fit. They can find me there and hopefully find me in the administration. Yeah, if you're looking to get fit, hit your goals, get some personal coaching, James has been able to do a ton of stuff, and I definitely recommend reaching out to him, following his page. He has some good content on there, some good workouts. So, be sure to. Thanks, everybody. We'll check in here soon, and this is the Vox Valdez podcast.